Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. Today I'm finally going to start my series on editing and why traditional editing is needed. And I'll probably just do this one video and then continue on with some other stuff for a little while, but I hope to come back to this topic over and over again because this is how we build a better industry, by promoting a good traditional editing system. Now, that's my assertion, that if you took good norms of traditional editing and applied them not just to the stories and not just to the comics, but to the industry itself, then you would have a healthy industry, and that one leads into the other. And I want to do that by talking about, first of all, what an editor and traditional editing norms look like, and what a healthy industry traditionally looks like, and compare and contrast that with the comic book industry that is out there today. And this can go for any of the comic companies, but I'm going to pick on Marvel again just because of the fact that, well, Marvel's the biggest offender with these things, and I have the most information on Marvel. So I'm going to talk about it in terms of Marvel. So here's the thing. Where do traditional editing norms come from? What does an editor traditionally try to do? Now, I would say their editing norms would reach all the way back to just use your reason and look at human nature and you can figure out what people want, but that's another argument. So let's just put it down to the street level, the nitty gritty of where it comes from here today. And I'm going to talk about it in the terms of, well, your editor wants your story to do well. And that's what your editor really wants to happen. So why does your editor want your story to do well? Because they have a vested interest in your story. The thing is that your story is a product, and that's all that it's based on. Your story is a product. That's why I went over supply and demand the other day and just hammered it home, because I thought that that was quite necessary in order to talk about good editing. And your editor wants your story to do well, because when your story does well, it generates money for you, and then that money gets passed on to them. Or at the very least, that acclaim of that good story gets passed on to them, and therefore they get other people asking them to edit, or you get to write a new story, and then you pay them again for that new story to edit it. And so that's the thing. They want your story to do well economically, so that you get money, so that that money and prestige is passed on to them and they make more money. It's pretty simple. And how do they make sure that your story gets to be a successful story and make a lot of money? Well, quite simply again, it's just by getting your readers to fork over their money, and as many as possible. Just simply, that's what needs to be done. So how does your editor ensure that that happens? Well, your editor ensures that that happens by making sure your story appeals to as many people as possible. Now, your editor is concentrated on the structure of the story. You as an author, you are actually telling the story, but your editor is making sure that the structure of the story is seamless and that it appeals to your audience, again, so that they'll fork over their money. And that's what they want to happen. And so they're the one who deals with all these background issues. And if you've ever dealt with an editor, you'll know that when you edit for content, they'll say over and over again things like, no, this will be confusing to your audience. Get it out. No, this is something that is going to bore your audience. Get it out. No, you're preaching to your audience here. Your audience will not like that. Get it out. It's all about satisfying your audience. That's what they're going to hammer home again and again. They want to satisfy your audience so that they'll get as big as audience as possible, so that they get as much money as possible for your book, so that it does as well as possible. And when you have this happening over and over and over again, you get a good product that your reader feels like they've been fulfilled and that they're glad that they forked over their money for it. Then that builds a healthy industry. And that's the way traditional editing works. Now, let's look at how editing works today at Marvel. Now, we have to do that by looking at how the editing works and what they think a successful industry looks like as well, and a successful product looks like as well. Now, if you're saying to yourself, well, obviously Marvel thinks a successful product is a product that makes as much money as possible, I'm sorry, Sana Amanat would not agree with you. And Sana Amanat is the second in command at Marvel. And I did an entire video on this. She came out and said, just because a character or a book doesn't do well, doesn't generate an audience, and therefore it gets canceled, they still consider that a success. And just soak that in for a minute if you didn't hear my other videos on that. She still considers these things a success, even though they don't generate an audience enough in order to stay published and to get canceled. She was talking specifically about America Chavez, I do believe, when she was talking about that. And so when she said that, I said to myself, what are you smoking, lady? But then she went on to explain why she thought and what they thought a successful product is. And she thought that as long as it got out there, then it was a success. All it needed to do was get out there, and then it was a success. It doesn't matter how well it did economically. It doesn't matter if it generated an audience. It doesn't matter if it got canceled. It was still successful because it simply got out there. Now, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you look at it by itself. But when you look at it in terms of some of the other things that Sana Amanat has said, it makes a little more sense. Because, of course, Sana Amanat has said in different venues that, comics and comic book characters are there to push ideas. So what they're trying to do for a successful product is that as long as they get their idea out there, then it is a success. That's all that they're trying to do, to get their idea out there. It's not about the economics of it. It's about getting their idea out to usually children, because they talk about their audience most often in terms of these are for children, and most specifically girls. They're always saying this is for little girls. They hammer that one home, certainly. And so that's what they consider a success. And as long as they get their message out there, it's a success. They're not using the comics so much as political actors themselves. They want to turn these children, usually girls, into the political actors with their ideas that they're putting out there. So what does an editor do in terms of this being what they are serving? Because it's not their audience that they're serving, it's the message that they're serving. Now, I had made a little joke in one of my other videos saying that, they're just trying to be politically correct, and you have politically correct editors out there at Marvel right now, and that's an oxymoron. And then someone put this really good comment on the video and said, no, a politically correct editor is called a censor. And yes, that was a great comment. Exactly. A politically correct editor is a censor. That's what your editors are doing. They want to ensure that not just the message gets out there, but that the purest form of the message gets out there, and it gets out there in a way that it can be absorbed and understood as best as possible. And of course, the way that it gets absorbed and understood as best as possible, since we're talking about these things being stories and not actually teaching you ideas, as in to say not academically presented to you, well, they do it by conveying their message and their idea emotionally. And so that's what your editor is there for in Marvel, to make sure the purest form of this idea gets out there and to make sure you swallow it emotionally. That's what they're doing. And you can say to yourself, well, how in the world is that supposed to produce a healthy industry? Well, there's two trains of thought on that. Number one being that if you have these SJWs, these socialist, communist-minded people that are running Marvel, well, literally straight out of the socialist communist playbook is you don't care about this industry, you use it, and you use it until it dies, and you just pump your message out with it, and that's it. And then you move on to the next industry that you can use. That's one of the ways that you can look at it. Or the other way that you can look at it is this, that it's all based upon sentimentality. That's the thing. And Disney is the master of sentimentality, because let's think about Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse, right? Now, I'm sure that kids today still know who Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse are. And yet there hasn't really been any push of any kinds of products, that is to say, your cartoons and your traditional venues for these characters, there hasn't been anything like that out there for, what, like 40 years or more? But yet still, these characters sell, and people still know these characters. Why? Because they're trading upon sentimentality. That's what Disney does. And so that's what they're trying to do with Marvel as well. They're trying to trade upon sentimentality. They're trying to take this industry, which used to be healthy because of the traditional norms of editing, and say that, well, people love these characters so much, so we'll just sell them sentimentality. And that feeds right into with what the editor is supposed to be doing, because of course they are not just presenting a pure form of their ideas, but they're doing it in an emotional way, and emotion and sentimentality go hand in hand. And so of course they're not just making sure that these characters and these stories appeal to the sentimentality of people who have read the stories before, but generate new sentimentality in the people who are just getting to read them. And that's what their editors do right now. And that's what they think a healthy industry looks like. Asana Amanat said, we put these characters out there, and even if their formats fail, we're going to push them out into new formats and again, as many ways as possible. That's what they're going to do. Why? Because they're just going to use Disney, which is a giant global corporation, to shotgun these images out there as much as possible, and then you generate more sentimentality, and you get people to buy these things based upon sentimentality. And that's their idea of a healthy industry. Now, if you are a traditional comic reader, you would not see that as a healthy industry at all. You would see the other format of traditional editing and under traditional editing as being the best form of a healthy industry, because the industry traditionally is based upon producing a good story, whereas the industry now is based upon producing a message and playing upon sentimentality. That's all that it's based upon. And that's not a healthy industry, not for people who actually like and read comics. And I would say that's why they're trying to replace their audience right now by growing a new audience from the ground up with young people. That's what they're trying to do. But if we wish to actually have a healthy industry, again, a healthy industry that we would define as healthy, then we need to be able to make sure we know these norms of editing, these old norms, so that we can pick apart their stories and what they're doing, so that we can complain, and complain in a constructive way, so that we effect change that will bring it back to an industry the way that it used to be and the way that it was healthy. Anyways, like I said, this is just the first of these kind of videos. I don't know if they'll do so well, but I think that I'm going to do them just to explain how and why I am going to criticize things from now on. It's through traditional editing norms, and that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this. And so if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right-hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a message. Tell me what you think about this idea, and like I said, I will be breaking these videos up with other videos about comics themselves directly, and so it won't be just this all the time. All right, I'll see you later. Bye.